I'm Tessa, 31. At our family dinner, I thought maybe, just maybe they'd see me. Instead, Mom's words cut deep. You have no home here. I froze. 1 week later, everything flipped. Her words still echoed as I sat at the long oak table, silverware clinking the sound too sharp for a room meant for comfort. The chandelier glowed overhead, but its light felt cold against my skin. Laughter bounced around me, none of it mine. I counted my breaths quiet and invisible, while Sean soaked in their praise like a star on stage. Before I tell you what happened next, drop a comment with where you're watching from. And if you've ever been overlooked by your own family, subscribe. You'll want to see how this ends. On the corner of the table, wrapped in gold paper, sat a gift. It wasn't mine. My fingers brushed the edge of my empty plate, remembering the time Mom had promised I'd always have a seat at this table. That night, her promise shattered. The dining room smelled of roast turkey and gravy mashed potatoes piled high, cranberry sauce gleaming red. It was a Sunday in Montana, a night meant for family warmth. Yet for me, every detail pressed down like a weight. My fork trembled when I lifted it, metal scraping too loud, as if calling out my presence in a room that had already dismissed me. Carol, my mother, raised her glass. Her smile was wide, but it never reached me. To Sean, she declared her voice carrying for closing that big contract, keeping the family proud. The clapping erupted, the kind that swelled like applause at a show. I smiled faintly small and forced my hands tightening under the table. Sean leaned back, soaking in the attention. Thanks, Mom. He said, the corners of his mouth curving just enough to glance at me. His smirk lingered like a shadow. Dad Richard sat quietly, nodding along, as always, eyes never lifting from his glass. When the noise died down, Mom's gaze shifted. It landed square on me, sharp as a blade. You should be proud, Tessa, she said, her tone laced with a sting. At least one of us is doing something real. The laughter bubbled up again, not cruel enough to be obvious, but enough to sting. My smile faltered. My fork slipped against my plate, the clatter ringing out before the silence returned. Heat crawled up my neck, though I didn't speak. My eyes dropped to the tablecloth's floral pattern, memorizing every leaf to keep from meeting their stares. Sean leaned closer, his voice low enough for only me to hear. Tough break, huh? Maybe someday you'll figure it out. The chandelier flickered. My heart beat fast, but my face stayed calm. I knew better than to give him the satisfaction of seeing me crack. The toast ended, conversation resumed, and I melted into the background once again. The gift in gold paper sparkled, untouched, its reflection dancing in the glass of Mom's wine. That gift wasn't mine. Nothing at that table was. Still, I sat quietly, every detail pressing into me, waiting for the moment I'd remember for the rest of my life. Then it came. Carol set her glass down with a final thud, her smile gone. She looked directly at me, eyes cold. You don't belong here. Not anymore. Don't come back. The words fell heavy, louder than the laughter had been. Forks paused midair. Sean's smirk widened. Richard's eyes stayed fixed on the rim of his glass, never daring to lift. My fork froze in my hand, useless. The room seemed to tilt, every sound vanishing except my own shallow breath. The chandelier swayed above me, steady, indifferent. I pushed back my chair, the legs scraping across hardwood. My body moved, but my voice didn't. My key pressed against my thigh in my pocket, suddenly foreign, already stripped of meaning. At the door, I turned once. Their faces blurred in the glow of the chandelier, Mom's resolve, Sean's grin, Dad's silence. The lock clicked behind me, final and cold. The night air rushed in, stinging my skin. I reached for the key in my pocket, gripped it tight, and realized it was nothing but metal now. I stood there, frozen, the house behind me, sealed laughter, faint inside, as if I'd never been part of it. The cold air hit harder than I expected. I stood on the porch, my breath sharp, my hand still holding the useless key. Inside, the clink of dishes and Sean's laugh carried faintly, muffled by walls that no longer sheltered me. I stepped off the porch, shoes crunching against gravel. The night was quiet, except for the sound of a distant dog barking. I tried my phone, Mom, Dad, Sean. None picked up. Each ring ended the same silence. I walked toward the streetlight, its flicker casting long shadows on the pavement. My reflection in a nearby window startled me, shoulders hunched, eyes wide, lips pressed tight to keep from shaking. I wanted to scream, but nothing left my throat. At the curb, I stopped. The house behind me glowed, warm voices carrying faintly through the glass. For years, I thought that glow meant safety. Now it felt like fire on the other side of a locked gate. I checked into a cheap motel downtown, the kind with faded curtains and buzzing neon. The clerk barely looked up as I slid my ID across. My suitcase felt heavier than ever, though it only carried a few clothes and my stack of unfinished scripts. In the room, I dropped onto the stiff bed. The key to my parents' house lay on the nightstand, gleaming under the lamp. I turned it over in my hand once, twice, then set it down. It meant nothing now. Sean's words still rang in my ears, his smirk, his whisper, his triumph at the table. Mom's tone sharper than glass. Dad's silence cutting deeper than any insult. I reached into my bag and pulled out Grandma Florence's old typewriter, the one I'd carried from house to house, the only constant. My fingers brushed the keys, the clack faint but grounding. Her words came back to me, soft and steady. Your stories matter. That night I didn't write. I just sat in the dim light, staring at the empty page, the typewriter waiting. Outside, the neon buzzed. Inside, I stayed still, holding on to silence the way others held on to pride. And for the first time, I knew the story wasn't over. The motel room smelled faintly of stale coffee and bleach, the kind of scent that clung to the curtains no matter how wide I opened the window. My suitcase lay open on the carpet, clothes folded in a rush, a stack of scripts shoved between them. The desk lamp flickered, buzzing like a tired insect. I sat on the edge of the stiff mattress, staring at the chipped wallpaper, trying to piece together how I had ended up here. I dialed my parents' number first. No answer. I tried again. Nothing. I called Sean, straight to voicemail. Each failed attempt left a hollow ring echoing in my ear like the sound of a locked door I couldn't push open. I typed out a message, "Can we talk?" but the 3 dots of reply never appeared. The silence from them was louder than words. Needing a distraction, I logged into my bank app. My stomach dropped. The savings account, the emergency fund I shared with Sean, was empty. $1,200 gone, drained in one withdrawal. My hands shook as I called the bank. The clerk's voice was calm, detached. "Yes, ma'am. That amount was withdrawn yesterday. By Sean Blair." My chest tightened, breath shallow. I pressed the phone harder against my ear, as if forcing myself to believe. "You're sure?" "Yes. That's what the record shows." When the call ended, the silence of the room pressed down on me. I dropped my phone on the bed and stared at the ceiling, tracing the cracks like veins branching across plaster. Even my safety net, the small cushion I thought I had, was gone. The neon sign outside blinked red against the curtains, casting the word vacancy in stuttering shadows across the room. It felt like a cruel joke space available everywhere, except where I needed it most. Later that night, my phone buzzed. A message from Mom lit up the screen. Just 4 words, "Sort yourself out." I read it twice, the tone as sharp and cold as her voice had been at dinner. I didn't reply. A minute later, Sean's voicemail came through. His voice was slick with satisfaction, dripping with a cruelty he didn't bother to hide. "Guess you really have nothing now, huh? Maybe it's time you stop pretending." The recording ended with a click, smug and final. I hit delete. The robotic voice repeated, "Message deleted." My hand was steady, even if my heart wasn't. I sat back on the bed, clutching my grandmother's typewriter I had pulled from my bag earlier. Its weight steadied me, the keys cool beneath my fingers. I could almost hear her voice, soft and warm, whispering across years. "Your stories matter, Tessa. Don't forget that." I closed my eyes and let the memory of her porch wash over me, the scent of lilacs, the creak of her rocking chair, the way she'd tapped the keys with me, patient and kind. But the motel walls didn't creak with kindness. They pulsed with the thrum of traffic outside, the neon buzzing like a reminder that I was alone. When I opened my eyes again, the screen of my phone glowed. A new email. The subject line froze me where I sat, "Florence Walsh Trust. Urgent." My heart skipped, the blood rushing in my ears. Grandma Florence. She had been gone 2 years. Why now? I stared at the glowing subject line, my thumb hovering, hesitant. The motel room felt suddenly smaller, air pressing against me. I tapped the screen. The message was from Robert Caney, attorney at law. His words were clipped formal, but each sentence hit harder than the last. You are entitled to assets under a trust established by Florence Walsh. Please contact me immediately. I read it again, slower this time. A trust for me. My grandmother had left something behind, something my parents hadn't told me about. My pulse quickened as I dialed the number at the bottom of the email. Robert answered on the second ring, his voice calm, steady, like a lifeline tossed into storm water. Tessa, he said, your grandmother set up a trust to protect you. It guarantees your right to stay in the family home and provides funds for your career. I gripped the phone tighter. Images flashed: the locked door, Mom's glare, Sean's smirk. They had known. They had locked me out anyway. There's more, Robert continued. Florence left a letter addressed to you. I'll send it with the documents. My throat tightened. I whispered, thank you, and ended the call. On the bed lay my useless house key, Sean's voicemail still echoing in my mind, Mom's text still sitting on my screen. Yet in my hands now was something else, proof that I hadn't been forgotten. A knock on the door startled me. Just the clerk delivering fresh towels, but my heart still raced. I slid the chain back in place, sat down, and pulled the typewriter onto my lap. The keys waited under my fingers, cold but alive. For the first time since that dinner, I didn't feel hollow. I felt a flicker of fight. Grandma Florence had seen me even when the others hadn't, and now her voice reached through the silence, telling me the story wasn't over. The next morning, I found myself in a conference room downtown, the kind with polished oak tables and fluorescent lights that hummed just a bit too loud. My palms were damp, but I held my grandmother's letter tight in my hand. Across from me, Mom sat rigid, her back straight, eyes sharp. Sean leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, smirk already in place. Dad stared down at his folded hands, avoiding everyone's gaze. At the head of the table, Robert Caney, my grandmother's lawyer, arranged his papers with calm precision. He cleared his throat. We're here to address the Florence Walsh Trust and its mismanagement. Mom's lips curved into something between a sneer and a smile. Mismanagement. That's absurd. Sean let out a short laugh, dismissive. But I saw the flicker in his eyes, a shadow of nerves. Dad stayed silent, as if his tie had tightened around his throat. Robert slid a set of documents across the table. This trust was created to ensure Tessa's right to the family home and funds to support her career. Yet records show $150,000 withdrawn without her consent, redirected into Blair Events Company. The words dropped like stones. My breath steadied. For weeks I'd been frozen, but not now. I locked eyes with Sean. You drained my savings too. $1,200. Even that wasn't enough. His smirk faltered, the muscles in his jaw tightening. That was different, he muttered, shifting in his seat. Different, I pressed. You took everything, Sean, and you thought I'd stay quiet. Robert continued, flipping through bank statements. These transactions trace back to Carol and Sean Blair, approved by Richard Blair. The trust explicitly prohibits personal or business use of its funds. Mom's face flushed. We built that company from nothing. If she refuses to contribute, she doesn't deserve a dime. Her words should have cut me, but instead they lit something steady inside. I set Grandma Florence's letter on the table, the neat cursive visible even through the envelope's thin paper. She thought otherwise. For the first time, Dad looked up, his voice low. We thought we were doing what's best for the family. I shook my head, calm but certain. No, you did what was best for yourselves. The silence that followed was heavier than any shouting could have been. Robert broke it with steady authority. Tessa is entitled to the house and the remaining funds, plus damages for the misappropriated amount. Sean slammed his palm against the table, the sound sharp. You're not taking anything. You'll waste it on your stupid scripts. His outburst echoed around the room, but instead of answering, I reached for the pen Robert laid in front of me. The click as I uncapped it was louder than his shouting. I pressed the tip to paper, the scratch of ink filling the silence. When I slid the signed document back, Robert nodded once. The others sat stunned. Mom pale, Dad hollow-eyed, Sean's mouth twisted but wordless. For the first time, I wasn't the quiet one. They were? Robert gathered the papers, his voice steady. The apartment deed can be transferred immediately. The trust will also release the remaining balance to Tessa's account. Additionally, the misused $150,000 will trigger a full audit. Repayment may be required. Mom's face drained of color. Sean leaned forward, fists tight, but said nothing. Dad's shoulders slumped, his silence no longer authority, only defeat. I sat straighter, Florence's letter still beside me. Its words echoed, "You are stronger than their doubts." My grandmother had seen this moment long before it came. She had given me the tools to stand here now. "I don't want your apologies," I said, my voice calm. "I want my freedom." The quiet that followed was sharper than shouting. They didn't argue. They couldn't. Robert placed another paper in front of me. The preliminary transfer agreement. I signed quickly, the pen gliding steady in my hand. Mom gasped as if I'd betrayed her, but I only looked at her once, steady and unflinching. "You walked away first when you locked that door?" I said softly. Robert nodded, collecting the signed documents. "That concludes our business today." I stood, sliding the letter back into my bag. No anger, no raised voice, only the sound of my chair scraping against the floor. As I left, their silence filled the room, heavy and final. In that moment, I understood I hadn't just signed papers. I had signed my own beginning. The apartment was small, but it breathed like freedom. A second-hand desk pressed against the window, a chipped mug filled with coffee sunlight spilling across bare walls. I stood in the quiet, the sound of the typewriter's keys echoing faintly, as if Florence herself were still guiding me. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a guest in someone else's house. I felt home. On the desk sat her letter, framed in a simple wooden border. I kept it there on purpose so her words were always near. "You are stronger than their doubts." I read them in the mornings before I started typing again at night when the silence pressed in. They were enough to steady me, to remind me why I hadn't broken when Mom locked that door, why Sean's smirk no longer haunted me. News of the family trickled in whether I wanted it or not. A headline in the local paper, "Blair Events faces audit amid allegations of misuse. Clients pulling contracts, rumors of collapse." I didn't need to read more. It wasn't my battle anymore. Mom sent another text once, "We need to talk." I blocked her number. Sean's social media had gone quiet, the constant stream of bravado gone dark. Dad never called at all. That silence was the sharpest cut, but I learned not to bleed from it. Instead, I built something new. Levi, a young director with a quick eye, leaned over my script one evening at the apartment, his voice filled with excitement. "This has heart, Tessa. We can make this work." Tara, a producer with a knack for seeing potential, smiled from across the table. "We'll figure out the business side. You just keep writing." Their faith was different from the hollow encouragement I'd grown up with. They didn't say it because they had to. They said it because they meant it. Over takeout boxes and late-night brainstorming sessions, they became more than colleagues. They were the family I chose. Nights stretched long, but they weren't lonely anymore. Levi would drag me to the diner down the street, sketching shots on napkins while I laughed at his terrible coffee habit. Tara taught me how to stretch a budget, her sharp notes scrawled on sticky pads stuck to my fridge. The apartment that once felt empty now buzzed with ideas, laughter, and a warmth that didn't come from obligation. One afternoon, an email arrived from the Missoula Film Collective. My script had been selected for their talent development program. I stared at the screen, my heart-racing hands trembling, not from fear this time, but from the possibility that maybe finally my voice mattered. The program opened doors I had never dreamed of, workshops in a local theater crowded with people who cared about story the way I did, Levi and Tara by my side critiquing drafts, sharpening scenes. Each session chipped away at the doubt that had been planted years ago at that family table. The night before my first pitch session, I stood by the window, Florence's letter in my hand. The city lights flickered below the Clark Fork River, reflecting the glow. I whispered the words aloud, You are stronger than their doubts. And for the first time, I believed it. The day of the pitch arrived sooner than I was ready for. A small conference room in Seattle, rows of chairs filled with producers, the air buzzing with quiet expectation. My notes shook in my hands, but when I began, my voice steadied. I spoke about the script, about resilience, about finding strength in silence. They leaned forward, questions flying, pens scratching against paper. One woman in sharp glasses smiled. "This could be something special," she said. The words stayed with me long after I left the room, like sunlight lingering after dusk. Back in Missoula, Levi and Tara were waiting with takeout cartons spread across my kitchen table. We laughed until midnight, sketching new ideas, building stories out of scraps of paper. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was chasing approval. I felt like I belonged. News of Blair events continued to circulate, lost clients mounting fines, the company crumbling under the weight of its own choices. I didn't gloat. I didn't even answer the phone when Mom tried one last time. I simply blocked the number and set the phone face down. One evening, I placed Florence's letter back into its drawer, slid the trust documents on top, and closed it with a soft click. The typewriter sat on my desk, keys, worn but waiting. I stepped out onto the balcony, the river stretching golden under the setting sun. The air was cool, clean, quiet. I rested my hands on the railing, breathed deeply, and didn't look back. The story wasn't finished, but for the first time, I knew I was the one writing it. Sometimes the loudest answers are found in silence, the turn of a key, the closing of a door, the steady step forward. Dignity doesn't shout. It lingers quiet, but unshakable. In the end, strength is knowing you can walk away and still carry your worth with you.